Alec Murdaugh, a lawyer in South Carolina from a very prominent family with a long legacy of being attorneys in that particular community, was recently sentenced to 2 life sentences for murdering his wife and youngest son. And these murders actually occurred on June the 7th of 2021. So this was almost a month-long trial, but the jury was so sure of this man's guilt that they only deliberated for about 3 hours, actually. So they came back with a guilty verdict very, very quickly after hearing all of this evidence put on by the prosecution and the defense. 28-day trial to be specific, with over 75 witnesses. One of the jurors said that they talked for about 45 minutes because the evidence was clear. So it sounds like they really only deliberated for about an hour. And perhaps we're just going through the verdict forms for the rest of the other 2 hours.
Moyer says it didn't take long to get everyone on the same page.
He started deliberating, going through the evidence. Everybody was pretty much talking. And about 45 minutes later, after all our deliberating, we figured it out.
So it took basically 45 minutes for you guys to come to a decision?
Probably about 45, maybe an hour.
That's really fast.
Well, the evidence was clear.
After 45 minutes of deliberation, they knew, based on that evidence being so clear, that this man was guilty. A key piece of the evidence that was considered by the jury was a Snapchat video from Paul, his son's phone, which actually recorded Alec Murdaugh's voice and demonstrated that he was at the scene of the murder just moments before they occurred.
He says it was this piece of video featuring Alec's voice at the crime scene moments before the murders that convinced him.
I hear his voice clearly, and everybody else could too.
And this was important because previously Alec Murdaugh had done recorded statements with police officers and other investigators where he stated that he was nowhere near the crime scene at the time that this happened, that essentially he came home and found his wife and his child dead. So that was a flat out lie, and he was impeached by his own son's Snapchat video, which showed he was there at least a couple of minutes before this killing occurred. And Alec actually admitted that it was his voice in that Snapchat demonstrating he was there minutes before it occurred.
Alec finally admitting it was him for the first time a year and a half after the murders.
When he said it was him, were you surprised?
I was very surprised.
Why?
That was his only savior right there.
Alec Murdaugh took the stand, and as a lot of folks may know, as a defendant in a criminal trial, you have a right to remain silent. You do not have to take the stand. And if you do not take the stand, the prosecution cannot use that against you. In other words, when they're talking to the jury or making arguments to the jury, they cannot comment on the fact that you did not take the stand. So for example, they can't get up and say, well, if the defendant was so innocent, why didn't he get up on the stand, he or she get up on the stand and tell you, members of the jury, that he's innocent? They can't do that. But he elected to take the stand.
His responses, how quick he was with the defense, and his lies, steady lies.
Did you feel like he was a liar?
A good liar, but not good enough.
Moyer also not convinced by moments like this. Alec appearing emotional on the stand.
What did you think when Alec Murdaugh took the stand?
I didn't think much of him.
Really?
Really. I didn't see any true remorse or any compassion or anything.
Even though he cried a lot on the stand.
He never cried.
He never cried. What do you mean by that?
All he did was blow snot.
Did you not see tears?
No tears.
How did you know he wasn't crying?
Because I saw his eyes. I was this close to him.
And a lot of times, and I try civil cases, but I'm friends with a lot of criminal trial lawyers. A lot of times criminal defendants will take the stand for 2 reasons. The lawyer suggests it because they're losing the case. The prosecution has done a good job of proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. and it's a bit of a last-ditch effort to try to connect with the jury and give the jury an explanation and to create some type of reasonable doubt. That's one reason. And the second reason is because the defendant client is arrogant and they don't listen to the instructions of their lawyer. Who knows what the answer is in this case? Alec Murdaugh has a reputation for being a pretty arrogant person, a pretty entitled person. He is a lawyer, so he's got some intimate knowledge of the criminal and civil justice system. Perhaps he thought he could manipulate the jury. Only time will tell. Maybe he'll write a book at some point. We can hear the real reason why he took the stand. But nevertheless, he elected to take the stand. So the question becomes, in a lot of criminal cases, particularly one where someone is accused of killing their immediate family members, is what's the motive? What's the motivation for the murder? Now, in a criminal trial, motive is not a specific element that has to be proven by the prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's certainly helpful because it gives context and gives the why he would actually do something like this. And this was a very brutal murder. He shot his son, I believe, in the back of the head with a shotgun, and basically, I think, and the defense said this in the opening statement, which kind of blew my mind. He said his head basically exploded like a watermelon. This was very brutal. And then the wife was shot in the back with an AR-15 at close range. So very, very brutal homicide. Why would he do something like this? One of the motives that the prosecution presented was that this gentleman, Alec Murdaugh, would do some very, very erratic things, especially after he was confronted with evidence of other misdeeds. So in this case, he owned his own law firm, and on June 7th of 2021, he was confronted by the CFO of the law firm about misappropriating client funds in the over $500,000. And so coincidentally, the day the CFO confronted him about the misappropriating client funds was the exact same night or day that he murdered his son, allegedly, at least allegedly at that time, his wife and his youngest son. And so that was a motive, is that maybe he learned about this, he learned everything was crumpling down on his legal career, that he was bringing negative light to the Murdaugh name, which again was very highly heralded in that community, and he just exploded. He was also addicted to opioids. That came out in the trial. There was testimony that he would take 10, 15, 20, 25 pills at a time and basically be out of his mind while he is on these opioids. So that's another proffered motive, is that he was on opioid pills at the time of this murder, and maybe he turned into another person, so to speak, and again lost control, and that's why he murdered his family in that way. I will say, and just kind of comment, that these are not necessarily the strongest motives that I've heard in these types of cases. I would have expected to hear evidence about some type of life insurance policy that he had on his youngest son or his wife. That's what you would expect to hear in this type of case, is that the motive was to collect life insurance money, those life insurance policies, to pay off his debt and to pay off some of these lawsuits that were going to come down from him misappropriating client funds. But we didn't hear any evidence of that in this particular case. There was also an incident in on September 3rd where there was more evidence of theft. He was actually forced to resign from his family's law firm, which had to be very embarrassing. And again, this was after the killing. September 4th, there was an incident where he was allegedly shot in the head, and he later admitted that he conspired with another individual for this person to kill him so that his oldest surviving son could collect a life insurance policy that he had on himself. So all in all, this is a real tragedy. As I mentioned, the Murdaugh family was very, very well known in this community, extremely powerful. In fact, Netflix did a documentary on this family and all of the crazy things that have gone on with this family over the years, including Paul, the son who was killed, who allegedly was under the influence years before while driving a boat, which led to the murder of a young lady. And allegedly, the Murdaugh family kind of conspired to tried to keep this under wraps and try to keep the youngest son from being indicted. All types of incidents that have happened with this family that are very strange, but fortunately it seems that there's finally been some justice given and that they've been held accountable, specifically Alec Murdaugh, held accountable for his actions.